Hello and welcome to our podcast today. And we are going to talk about the best way to learn languages. I know you love to learn and teach foreign languages. And what languages have you studied, Fred?
I studied French as a Canadian. I did about, I don't know, 9 years of French, 10 years of French in school, studied French in university. I studied German. I studied Italian. I lived a long time in Italy. I studied at the Dante Alighieri Institute in Rome. I studied German. My family is originally from Austria, so I had German at home when I was a kid. And I went to German school on Saturday morning. My dad sent me to German school, and I studied German at university. I lived in Austria. I lived in Berlin for 5 years, so I learned German. In school, I also studied Latin. I had 5 years of Latin
Oh,
in high school.
really? It's very
Yeah,
hard language. It's a
and I did
dead.
well. Latin helped me a lot with Russian.
Oh, really?
The many concepts in Latin are exactly the same in Russian. Latin has 6 cases, masculine, feminine, neuter. Latin doesn't use the verb to be in the present. I remember when I was studying Latin, I did Latin even at university. I was trying to read Latin texts, and I thought, how can anybody read this? It's so strange, so different. And when I started learning Russian, I saw so many similarities with ancient Latin. And so Latin really helped me to learn Russian. Yeah. So I did a course in Hindi when I went to India. I tried to learn Hindi. I didn't learn anything, but I tried. And I have experience with languages. Yeah.
What was the easiest language for you to learn?
Well, probably German, because I had it already in my ear. And that's a point I want to discuss later when we talk about difficulties with Russian, because the morphology of Russian is very different for English speakers or for speakers of Romance languages. So it's much harder to remember words. The phonetic sound and the structure of the words are different. So when you see a new word in Russian, it's hard to remember it. And I get so confused between words. They sound so similar to me, like напражнение, наслаждение, it sounds all the same to me, because I don't have the sound of the language isn't in my ear from an early age. So
the sound are the hardest.
Yeah. Well, not the pronunciation, because the pronunciation is actually very clear in Russian. But the morphology of the words, the shape of the words is very different from Romance languages or Germanic languages. And so it's harder to remember new words for us in Russian. So, for example, when I studied German and I saw new words, for example, I went to live in Germany, I was reading the newspaper, I saw new words, I wrote down the word. After 2 or 3 times I knew it. 2 times I knew it. But in Russian, when I see a new word, I have to see it 10 times, 50 times before I can remember it. Because the shape of the word is so different.
I know you read a lot in Russian, yeah?
Yeah, I like to read. I think that's one of my favorites.
What's your favorite author?
Well, there's so many great writers in Russian. That's just why it's so wonderful to learn Russian through reading, because there's a huge amount of content. I love Chekhov. I think remember when I was in Odessa, we were talking about Chekhov.
Yeah, sure.
I remember. Dostoevsky, of course, Maxim Gorky, Tolstoy. Yeah, they're all wonderful writers, and it's not boring to read. Not boring. So
not boring, but hard because it's in Russian, yeah.
Of course,
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know you teach languages as well, yes? What method do you use effectively in your classes?
Well, I'm not teaching beginners, okay? So beginning that's a completely different game. I'm teaching people who already speak English and they want to get better. So people want to practice conversation. If I do private lessons, I think the most important thing is for them to speak. I try to make them speak and listen to them, but I want them to speak, to practice, because they don't have an opportunity to speak when they're alone. So reading you can do alone. You can watch videos or listen to podcasts alone, but to actually to speak a language, you have to be with someone. And if the teacher speaks too much, then the student doesn't get an opportunity to speak. So I say I teach intermediate up to upper intermediate people, and I ask them to speak. I try to encourage them to speak.
How do you
For
motivate them to speak? Maybe sometimes they're reserved people. They don't want to speak a lot. They are introverts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the talent of the teacher, and you have to be interested in many things. I remember I had a student in Rome, maybe 30 years ago, and he was only interested in football. So I had to learn about, the Roman football team and the famous players on the Roman football team because that was what he was interested in. So a language teacher is a little bit like a journalist, like a good journalist. You have to be curious about what the student likes and sympathize and have to have interest in that. And this,
And encourage them to speak. Yeah.
yeah, and encourage them to speak. Yeah, of course.
Sure. And so you read a lot to motivate them to be in course of everything, and you can support any topic they want. Yeah.
Oh, not any topic. Sometimes it's hard. Yeah, if the interests are very different, yeah, I try. It's obviously the best chemistry is with students who have common interests. If I find a student I have a common interest with, then we have a good chemistry, and then the lesson for me is not a lesson. It's just an interesting conversation. But for the student, the benefit is that they can speak and they can express themselves.
Yeah. And do you teach very young children or teenagers or just young people? Because they are different. We are sometimes having gaps in our generations. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. Young people, very young people are talented, but they're not motivated because they don't know why to learn the language. It's imposed upon them by their parents or the school. So for the teacher, sometimes the teacher is in a difficult situation because you have like a quadrangle. You have the teacher, the student, the parents, and then the school teacher, the teacher in the school. So you have multiple players in this game. And the relationship is not just between the teacher and the student. And the goal is not just learning, but the relationship is between the teacher, the parent, the student, and the teacher at school. And the goal can be different goals to have a good mark. Sometimes having a good mark does not mean that the student is learning. It means the student has memorized something. So I try to avoid teaching young people.
Uh-huh. But I think it's the best motivation is to go somewhere, to travel a lot, to talk to people in different languages, their languages. Do you do that? Do you learn languages before traveling?
Yeah, I do that. I do that. Of course, I know that I can't learn a language well. So I went to Iran 7 years ago and I took a long trip in Iran and I watched videos. I bought a book of grammar and I said, well, I'm not going to, I learned the alphabet, the Arabic alphabet. I studied hard to learn that. And I thought I'll go to Iran and of course I can't learn to speak in 2 months, which I studied it, but to have a little knowledge and it helps a lot. And also it makes you you have better contact with people if you try, you know? So, I would say yes. I've traveled and I haven't gone to many places where I can't speak anything. Yeah.
And sometimes people now prefer exchanging of SMS messages between themselves instead of conversations, yeah? And what do you think? What is better? SMS messages or just a live
My
conversation?
world, that's not my world. Сказать по-русски мой мир.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
It's not my world. I don't use SMSs for conversation. Maybe to communicate, important, I'm going to be late 5 minutes for the appointment or, some, important detail, but I don't converse with SMS. No. Text messaging. No.
Yeah.
No. I would say,
Do you usually watch movies or listen to the
yeah,
news?
much. Movies at the beginning are good because you have to get used to the sounds of the language. And so I watched a lot of Russian movies also because there's many, many good movies in Russian too. So it's also very interesting to watch Russian movies in Russian.
But
So I
I
watch a
think
lot.
it's hard, yeah?
Well, I think you have to, when I begin, I watch with subtitles. So I just want to hear the language. So, also I watch a movie more than once. I don't watch a movie one time. So there's some movies I've watched in Russian 10, 20 times. So yeah, I enjoy that. And also when I'm tired, if I don't feel like reading or I don't feel like doing grammar exercises, movie is a lazy way of exposing yourself to a
Lazy,
language.
yes, sure,
Lazy. Yeah, I
lazy.
watch a movie with subtitles And for 2 hours, I hear Russian, and it did something useful.
Okay. And which lesson, in your opinion, the most interesting for students, and which is the most boring for them?
You mean what kind of method, or?
No method or kind of lesson, and maybe materials, and what is the most interesting and most boring?
Yeah, the most interesting is if the students can have something interesting to see, to talk about, even at the beginning, even at the very, very beginning. So a lot of books, they use things about language in the hotel or on the telephone. But actually, in experience, that may be not the most important thing people want to talk about. So if I go to Russia or if I go to Iran, maybe I want to talk about history or talk about something else, literature or something more, for me, more interesting. So the material should be interesting for the student. I think boring is when it's not interesting for the student.
Yes, sure. And do you agree that children are more capable students in learning languages, or this is a myth?
No, this is absolutely true. I've seen it many times. I've seen it about 3 or 4 times, and I've been amazed. But children learn the language fast in the street, and maybe not so fast in the classroom. So if you take a 6-year-old boy and you put him in the street playing with other, a 6-year-old Ukrainian boy playing in the street with English speakers, in 3 months he'll speak English perfectly. But if you put him in a classroom and, he maybe never will learn English.
But why? Maybe they are reserved, shy to speak or learn.
Because the children want to communicate, right? Language is a form of is communication. So young children don't know that in the classroom why they're learning a language. It's imposed by their parents, imposed by the teachers. So maybe they will study because they want to get a good mark, but spontaneously you can see kids, and I can give you examples, very interesting examples. Amazing. They can learn a language to perfection in 3 months with no accent when they're 5 years old or 6 years old. But the same kids, if you force them in a classroom, they may never learn, or take them 10 years to learn a language.
So the conclusion is to organize the class so such a way they can communicate freely in the classroom.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It would be the best way for them to relax, not to be shy, and to motivate themselves in games or something interesting. Yeah.
Yep. That's what I agree. Yeah.
Maybe you have some advice for Russian learners.
For Russian learners, yeah. Well, I think you have to work to learn a language, but work, and you have to spend time every day, and you have to work. So you have to have discipline. But discipline doesn't mean that you should do something boring. So it means you have to be in contact with the language every day. And I find personally grammar exercises a waste of time, or let's say relatively not useful. I use grammar only when I'm curious, only when I don't understand something. So if there's something people are saying in Russian and I don't know why they say that, then I look it up, and maybe I will do an exercise in grammar to understand why they say that, right? But I don't think grammar is a house, but you don't build, a language is a house, but you don't build the house of language like you build a regular house from the foundation up. This is a big mistake. Language is built subconsciously. You build the house of language through being exposed in contact with the language, and not from the foundation up. So it's sometimes very boring. So I want to say to people who want to learn a language, spend time with the language, find 1 hour a day to do something with the language interesting, so that you're not bored, and do it every day.
Thank you very much, Fred.
Is that it?
Yes, and welcome to our city, Odessa, to practice in Russian. And of course, I think it's more interesting than to learn it alone. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Yes,
Of course.
thank you. Thank
Very
you.
nice seeing Odessa. I had a good time in Odessa. Very nice place. I hope to come back and do some more lessons with you.
Oh, really? Yes, and thank you for your interview.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.